This week on LTC News, plans for the Smith-Baker Center.
I think it's time for a rebirth of the Smith-Baker Center.
Responding to the opioid crisis.
So the problem is substantial, and Lowell itself has seen large increases.
And protecting our planet.
Being more mindful of what chemicals we use in our lawns and our gardens.
Stay with us. Welcome to LTC News. I'm your news anchor, Alanna Flood. Lowell came out to celebrate Earth Day on April 22nd. A crowd gathered in the morning at the Lowell National Historical Park Visitor Center and then marched in a parade to UTEC, where environmental concerns and solutions were the topics of the day.
Well, it's our shared planet. People all across the globe live on this most marvelous place, and I think the important thing about Earth Day is to remind us how we need to care for the Earth. We make living off these places, but as we do it, we need to do it with great thought.
So I'm taking the initiative to ban plastic bags here in Lowell. I want more electric vehicles in the downtown area and all throughout Lowell. I would like to see us continue with our complete streets policy, which means more multimodal uses for bicycles and walking. So I'm very dedicated to this.
Well, MassPIRG has a few initiatives going on. Right now we're showing a Save the Bees campaign. We're talking about reducing the use of antibiotics, because that's become an issue, and making UMass Lowell a 100% renewable resource using campus in the future.
Just being more mindful of what chemicals we use in our lawns and our gardens, thinking of other ways that we can use our background lawns. So instead of just having grass, we can have more edible stuff. We can create more climates for birds and animals. So just a ton of little things that we can do, even on a small scale, even if you don't actually want to grow stuff that will help the environment. Yeah.
So I think the first step is getting educated. So coming to wonderful events like this on Earth Day to talk to all these vendors and all of these organizations about what you can do.
I think a solution would be for people to get involved, to realize that there are things they can do right here in Lowell in their own backyard. It's a matter of taking that first step. That's always the hardest in any journey.
I think one of the things that we can do is improve the adoption of solar. Battery technology, improvements in battery technology are going to make huge changes in how much power we can actually store and use later. But reducing our carbon footprint and fossil fuel utilization is the number one thing we need to do today.
We're doing that with our Solarized Mass program. We're taking that program and making solar available and affordable to more people. That's going to lead to the idea being realized that you can have solar, you don't have to use natural gas as a heating fuel. It's a matter of getting one house at a time switched over, and we think we can do that. We need to do that.
Kids really understand the urgency because it's their futures, and they are the least involved. They contributed least to the problem, and they're going to have to face the consequences more than anybody else. So it's so important that we educate young people, and that's one of the things we're doing at the Daily Middle School with the Climate Change Club.
The turnout showed the number of people and organizations that are moving Lowell in a more sustainable, green direction. In the April 24th City Council meeting, there was a lot of discussion about access to the Page softball field at Shed Park. The boys' Little League suggested that they share the field, as it would fit their need for an intermediate-sized field that is between Little League and a Major League size. The Department of Public Works has already done some work moving fences on the softball field. Chris Snow, head of Shed Park Baseball, apologized and said they were not trying to take over the field. As this is the only field for girls in Lowell, several counselors spoke against having the boys use the field at all, and a motion was put forward that it should remain a girls' softball field. The motion passed unanimously. At the same meeting, the council discussed a motion put forward by the Environment and Flood Issues Subcommittee to draft an ordinance that would ban plastic bags in Lowell as of January 1st, 2019. The motion passed by a vote of 6-2, with Councilors Elliott and Conway voting no. Councilor Elliott wanted to include allowing biodegradable bags, and Councilor Conway wanted to wait for the state to take action.
Motion passes.
At the May 2nd City Council meeting, the big news was the vote in favor of option 3A for the new high school. Option 3A would expand the current school footprint by taking the adjacent property by eminent domain. The new gym would be constructed there, and then the old gym would be demolished, so no temporary gym would be needed. Also, no temporary classrooms. It seems the new location of the high school is now finally decided. Prescription opioid use increased substantially in the 2000s and led to steep increases in addiction. Many addicts turn to heroin when their prescriptions run out and they can no longer afford pills sold on the street. On April 25th, Karen Vigru, director of the Lowell Health Department, spoke with Dr. Tom Stopka of the Tufts University Medical School and Amanda Shaw of the Lowell House about addiction and related diseases in Lowell.
Heroin is very easily obtained. It's ubiquitous throughout our community, not only in cities, but in suburban and rural communities across Massachusetts. And it's cheap. It's quite cheap compared to prescription opioids and pills on the street. So the problem is substantial, and Lowell itself has seen large increases. And on top of that, we see a lot of non-fatal overdoses. So the problem goes beyond those who have died. The good thing is more people are being rescued with the use of naloxone.
Drug dealers are now adding fentanyl, a very potent opioid, to the heroin they sell, making addiction much more deadly. In order to save lives, treatment has evolved from urging total withdrawal from drugs to a harm reduction model.
It's really important that we do focus on these harm reduction techniques. And so the conversation shifting probably within the past 5 years from, you need to stop using drugs, they're bad for you, to how can we reduce your substance use? How can we make it safer for you? Conversations that I have on a weekly basis. Are you using alone? Make sure you're using with someone. Don't mix your prescription medications when you're, specifically IV drug use. Things like that. Use clean needles. And so those are really the conversations that we're starting to have with people with no judgment. And that's really what people need.
HIV and hepatitis C are on the rise in our community.
The HIV has been alarming, not only in Massachusetts, but in other parts of the U.S. And particularly, we've begun to see spikes in HIV cases. And if we let down our guard, if we don't continue with strong prevention programs, harm reduction programs, really using all the tools in the toolkit, it can raise its head again and impact our community in a significant way.
Our HIV outreach team has really been talking about PrEP, how to stay safe, to reduce your risk of getting HIV. We provide contraceptives at Lowell House for individuals, and we have those conversations in our programs all of the time.
Yeah, I think it's important to mention or define it for folks. It's pre-exposure prophylaxis. So it's using an HIV medication once a day, preventively, prophylactically, so that their risk of acquiring HIV, if they're exposed to HIV, is greatly diminished.
New drug regimens can keep HIV under control and can cure hepatitis C.
People are living with HIV. They can take antiretroviral therapies, which can prolong their life. There are many side effects associated with it, so it's not without challenges. But there are fantastic drugs. The new direct-acting antivirals that are available for hepatitis C, that just came about in 2013, and they're fantastic medications. It can be once a day or a few times a day for 8 to 12 weeks, and 95% and above of the people who take the treatment are cured. And
which is
that's
amazing.
huge.
10 years ago, it was so scary when we were hearing about new cases of hep C.
This downtown building began its life in 1884 as the First Congregational Church. In 1969, it was renamed the Smith Baker Center after Reverend Smith Baker, a minister who had served the congregation for 30 years in its early history. The Smith-Baker Center was a city community and senior center until finally closing its doors in 2003, when the new senior center on Broadway Street was completed. In 2015, the Coalition for a Better Acre came forward with a proposal to purchase and develop the building and give it a new life as a community and cultural center. The city accepted. The CBA and the city are finalizing the purchase and sale agreement.
Once we have ownership of the building fully, then the first order of business is seal the holes, stop the water damage and the deterioration, and start cleaning this up a little bit.
As the anchor tenant, the CBA will move their offices from Moody Street into the building.
It's got such a great location, right across the street from City Hall and the library. People know where it is, and it's the gateway between downtown and the Acre. So really connect those neighborhoods better than they have been in the past. Downstairs will be the community center and the office space. We also have all the CBA programming here, so our workforce development program, our after-school program, our civic engagement programming, community meetings. We could have language classes, dance classes, Zumba classes, exercise classes. The possibilities really are endless here.
The crown jewel of the building is its gorgeous two-story performance hall, the former chapel. In recent decades, the hall has hosted the likes of Allen Ginsberg, Lawrence Ferlinghetti, and Maya Angelou, and has seen performances by Ray Manzarek of The Doors and Patti Smith.
I think it's time for a rebirth of the Smith-Baker Center. It's got such a great history that we could really bring that back, and to have this size venue, we'll probably have about 600 seats once we're done. It's a good small size intimate venue with near perfect acoustics still, despite the fact that the building's been empty for 15 years. I mean, this could be a place to have the winter version of the Summer Music Series.
When the brick and masonry building was built and furnished in 1884, the total cost was $57,000. The CBA estimates that a 21st century full rehab will cost $16 million. They hope to raise the first $10 million through their capital campaign, which is already underway.
There's going to be lots of naming opportunities. You see all these seats in this auditorium. You can have your name put on a seat, or if you have a few more dollars in the bank, maybe you could have the performance space named after you. For the rest of the financing, we are a community development corporation. We build a lot of affordable housing. We've rehabbed a lot of historic buildings like St. Joseph's High School and Elementary School. We could use new market and historic tax credits from the state for this project, which, they come with some ties, but, you work around that. And they're a great asset to a community development corporation to be able to use those. For me personally, as kind of a Lowell history nerd, to see this building sitting here vacant and basically deteriorating by neglect, we don't want to see that. You think about all the stories. I obviously wasn't here when the Dutton Street row houses were torn down, but so many people are still hurt by that and say, all these buildings we didn't save. But then you look at all the buildings that were saved and all the mills and how they've all been reborn into housing and office space and how beautiful they are. Building from new isn't always better. You have a building with the bones like this building, to be able to reuse it, restore it, and make it great again, there's nothing better than that.
Including about 2 years set aside for fundraising, the CBA expects to complete the project in about 5 years. Downtown Lowell First Thursdays is a series of arts-related evening events downtown. The family-friendly activities take place rain or shine from 5 to 9 p.m. on the first Thursday of each month, except for this July when it will be on the second Thursday. Many galleries, restaurants, museums, and shops will be participating, and all are welcome.
First Thursday is an artist-driven initiative to share the amazing wealth we have downtown of restaurants, galleries, art settings, museums, shops. This is a chance for everyone to come and enjoy what's going on in downtown Lowell. The people who live here, like myself, enjoy downtown on a daily basis. But one night a month, we celebrate all of the arts in downtown. We have art, we have music, we have food, we have lots going on, and all of it is geared to celebrate our very rich artistic community that we have downtown.
The final Downtown Lowell First Thursday is September 6th. For more information, visit their Facebook page. In this week's Sunspot, Lowell Sun Enterprise editor Chris Scott sits down with candidate for State Senate Terry Ryan.
Hello, everyone. I'm Chris Scott, the Sun Enterprise editor. Thanks for tuning in to this week's edition of Sunspot. We're continuing our series of interviews with candidates running for the 1st Middlesex District State Senate seat. That's the Senate seat formerly occupied by Eileen Donahue, who is now the Lowell City Manager, to no one's surprise. With me today is Terry Ryan. Terry, thanks for coming in.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
This is great.
Terry's a Lowellian who's now living in the Westford.
In Westford,
I was
yes.
going to describe the town, but I'm not going to do that. The last time I was with Terry, and this we'll start off on kind of a light note. Terry was at the Sun editorial board meeting, and he was a candidate for the 3rd congressional district. That's the seat being vacated by Nikki Songas. But Terry later decided that his efforts would be better spent running for state senate. So Terry, tell us why you made that decision and what brought that on.
So, of course, it was all you, Chris. No, I was just kidding. No, I looked at the race, and I had a lot of people that talked to me about how this would probably be a better fit. I had, some Democratic people in town, people I, respect and I look up to. And of course, I talked it over with my family. I looked at the challenges, the opportunities of both. And at the end of the day, I decided that, I think I could better serve the constituents of the 1st Middlesex District than continuing on with the congressional race. I was fully committed to the congressional race, but when the door opened, I had to open it, and I've walked through that door.
It was more appealing, wasn't it?
It's a better fit for me, and I think it's just a better fit for me to represent the 6 communities as opposed to the 37. When you get into a race like that, it's a very big race.
You've been around, and I'm sure you've heard this, and I've heard it as well. There are several well-known Lowell candidates in this race, including 3 former Lowell mayors, plus a union activist. Did you look at the field of Democratic candidates? I think there are 4, right? 4 or 5, and say, wait a minute, if all those guys are from Lowell, some of them are all from the same neighborhood. There's one who lives in Pawtuckaville, I think. All the other ones live in Belvedere. You must look at that and say, boy, they could beat each other pretty well. And here I am from Westford, one of the larger communities in the district, besides Lowell. Boy, there could be some promise there.
I am from Lowell.
Well,
I was born in Lowell. so all of the candidates, I am from Lowell. So I could be looked at as a Lowell candidate. I grew up in Belvedere on Loose Street, a few streets over from some of the other candidates. I think it's going to be a very interesting race. I look forward to running an informational race. I know I've heard the term spirited. I think I'm going to focus on the issues. I think we have a lot of issues to focus on. So that's what I will be doing. I think it's a great race. I know a lot of these guys. I've gotten to meet John Drinkwater. So, I think it's going to be a good race. I'm going to focus on the issues and what I can do for the district.
Before we talk about a few of those issues, we only have a short period of time. Just take the opportunity to tell people who you are. I know you left your job to run for Congress, and I'm assuming you're still running full-time for this race.
Yes.
Just tell people a little bit about your background.
Sure. I spent 13 years at Raytheon Company, so I'm an engineer by trade. I spent 15 years after that at Lucent Technologies, working the communications data networking side. I left that, and I went to Community Teamwork, where I worked as the director of the Small Business Center. As such, I worked with
That's quite a contrast from the high tech to CTI.
But it was a great jump. It was a great jump to come back into the city, work downtown, work with clients in Lowell, Lawrence, Haverhill. And I had 16 loan clients that I was helping them with real mom and pop type small businesses on Merrimack Street, Everett Mills, even in the public market down in Boston. So we had a good mix of businesses that I supported. And that was a very satisfying job. I jumped in the congressional race, and I left that position to do it full time.
Right.
So now I'm going to continue to do that now. My wife Carrie and I, were both born and raised in Lowell. We now live in Westford, and for the past 6 years, I have been on the Westford School Committee.
And you're currently the chairman.
Oh, last night there was an election, so my term is over. I am no longer on the school committee in Westford. But that really, when you're on the school committee, you deal with parents, you deal with school administrators, and it really gave me a chance to help people make some positive change in the education of some kids. And it's a great district. So, you know, I look forward to, you know, running for the state senate and taking that knowledge and working with the city and the towns. I think it's very important that we can work together as one district and we can have a really bright future.
What is your, in running for state senate, what do you think is your most important attribute? What do you bring to the table that Ed Kennedy, Rodney Elliott, Bill Martin, and John Drinkwater do not have?
I'm an engineer by trade. I understand problems. I break problems down into their simplest pieces, and I can fix problems. I work with people to collaborate and find solutions. So I think when it comes to infrastructure, bridges, roads, I get that. I get the mechanics behind all of that. I also have the perspective of living in a suburb and in the urban setting. So I bring that perspective to it. And I've sat on the school committee. So I understand the school budget and all the particulars about that. So I think I do bring a different perspective to the race.
What is the most pressing issue that you see facing the 1st Middlesex District right now, where your background of being an engineer, going to work for a social service agency, living in Lowell, now living in Westford, where that pedigree could be most advantageous?
You know, I look at the opioid problem in the district. It's in the district. It's just not a Lowell problem. You know, we have that throughout the district, so I will actively work on that. Infrastructure issues.
Let's just talk about opioids just for a minute. Just say that. You know, lots of people say that, identify that as an issue. That's no, everyone knows it's an issue.
Everybody knows that,
Okay.
right.
What would you specifically do to try to make it less of an issue? I mean, what is your proposal? What is, you know, I'm looking for a specific there, other than just identifying it as a problem.
No, we all know it's a problem. So we all have to work on it together. We have to work with the towns and the cities. We have, you know, in the city of Lowell, we have a lot of programs to help the people that are addicted and are having an issue with this. You know, I need to make sure that the towns are included in that. If there's intervention programs that are available to those out in the other communities of the district. So what's working in Lowell? Can we bring that program out to the towns? Can we get some more involvement and be active and move forward and make the changes that, you know, just bring it out to the towns and the communities, basically, is what I want to say.
Are you familiar with the Lowell program where they have a police officer, a firefighter, I believe there's an EMT, I forget the acronym right now, but it's a group of men and women that go out and work with addicts to try to prevent them from relapsing and using again. Do you think, and that's been highly acclaimed, and it's
I've heard
well
of it,
publicized.
yes.
I just can't think of the acronym. Hopefully I'll get it before we leave today. Is that a program that you'd like to replicate in the communities?
I'll look into it a little more. I'd absolutely, if it's working in the city, if it's something we could absolutely, you know, I'd work with the cities and the towns in the district to see if that's something that they would want to join in with. And if there's something I can do as a state senator to help that, I will absolutely do that.
I'm sure that would be bringing home money and funding for it.
If absolutely, absolutely. But it's not just a district problem. Also, it's a national problem.
You talk about a lot of issues to focus on, so we hit on the opioid crisis. Name 2 or 3 others that you would like to address if you were elected.
Infrastructure, absolutely infrastructure throughout the district. You know, I know it's been brought up, the Rook Bridge. You know, there's a lot of things.
There was some news on that last week.
Was okay, yeah. So you know, there's a lot of things we do. You know, the Rook Bridge is not just a bridge. You know, it affects economic opportunities on both sides of the river. It affects property values on both sides. It affects health and safety. Because, you know, ambulances from Westford go over that bridge morning, noon, and night. Okay, so that affects, you know, the safety of patients throughout the district. I would absolutely, once again, being an engineer, let's look at this problem. That bridge is an engineering marvel to be there for 30 years. Okay?
A temporary bridge.
You know, it's a temporary bridge. There are permanent bridges that haven't been around that long. So I think we need to absolutely move forward on that. I know there's a few studies going on. We should do what we have to do, get moving on that, and get that bridge replaced as soon as we can. I think that's an economic that's an economic issue that we can address. That's a health and safety issue. That could beautify more of the riverbank up there. There's a lot of positives to getting that bridge replaced. Okay?
What are some of the other infrastructure needs in the communities?
Oh, if we want to bring economic opportunities to the district, we absolutely have to make sure that the roads are well paved, bridges are in repair, we have proper utilities that are out there, and internet access. If we want to bring businesses into this district, we need to focus on getting the infrastructure. We also have to look at education. Okay, education. We need to have a trained workforce, a workforce for the future. We need to make sure that people in the district have an education that will get them a job, that will allow them to support their families. Okay, and when we can support the families, then that's a boom to economic opportunity also.
Those are three good issues. We only have 2 minutes left, believe it or not, it went fast. Let's just hit on a couple of the ballot questions that have been certified. How do you feel about the millionaire's tax?
I support the millionaire's tax. I think we need to have people pay their fair share. As far as the threat that people are going to leave the state.
I was going to ask you about that. Do you buy into that?
Not so much. Yeah. Not so much. I think if you have a beautiful house somewhere, you're probably not going to leave because you're paying a little more tax. So I guess I would support that, and I will just have to.
Isn't some of the millionaire's tax, if it does pass, some of it's supposed to be devoted for infrastructure improvements?
It is. Infrastructure and I believe education
Which
also.
you hit on, yeah.
Yes. So I think that's a good use of the money. It's being directed to a specific purpose, and that makes it more understandable to people, more acceptable to people.
Great. So. One more question, and then we can just wrap it up. The other certified ballot question aims to repeal the state's recently passed law offering broad protections for transgender individuals in public spaces.
We need to support transgender, the transgender population. And, it's great that you brought that up, because when I was chairman of the school committee in Westford, we did have that issue come up before the board. While I was chairman, we had a full house. I allowed everyone to speak on both sides, okay? But at the end of the day, we approved that unanimously to incorporate a transgender policy into the schools. And my biggest lesson from that night was that the kids were already living the policy before we wrote it. So they were waiting for the adults to catch up and write the policy so that it was documented. But we had kids stand up there and speak.
Takes a lot of courage.
Takes a lot of courage. They spoke about the policy. They spoke in favor of it. And it was the adults that had to catch up. So I'm in favor of the policy. And
so yes and yes.
Yes and yes.
So in 15, 20 seconds, we have to wrap it up. Yep. Why should someone vote in the 1st Middlesex District for you in the Democratic primary on September 4th?
I think you have to look at my years of experience, both in private sector and the public sector. I think I've earned the respect of people that I've worked with and constituents, and I look to bring that honest work, the ethical work, to the State House. I'll work for the district hard every day, knowing that, I have to face these people when I come back.
I've got to give you the
Yep, all right,
Terry,
thank you.
Thanks for coming in.
Appreciate it, Chris. Thank you very much.
Thanks for tuning in to this week's edition of Sunspot. We'll be back in a couple weeks, and I'll try to have John Drinkwater. He's the last Democratic candidate that I have not interviewed. Have a good night, everyone.
That's it for this edition of LTC News. You can find us on LTC channels 8 and 99, online at ltc.org, on Roku at LTC Lowell, or get the link on Facebook. I'm Alanna Flood. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.